Why, oh why, does your back crack and pop and grate? That's what we're talking about today on the Retrain Back Pain podcast. I'm your host, Dinneen and I'm so glad we're here together to talk about cracking backs. So let's get into it. Why does my back crack so much? The easy answer is we don't know. No, there's some reasons why your back is cracking, but the quick and dirty on should you be concerned is generally if it doesn't hurt, don't worry about it. If there's no pain or swelling or recent injury that you need to be concerned about, and you're just having the occasional crack or pop or grind, it's probably not super concerning. But you may still want to know, why is it doing that? So we're going to talk about that today. It's called spinal crepitus, sort of like the creeping of the spine. And it could be caused by cavitation or arthritis. One is less harmful than the other, right? So cavitation is generally considered harmless, and arthritis can lead to some pretty uncomfortable situations down the road. So cavitation, crepitus by cavitation is usually more in the genre of a pop or a crack. And you'll hear that in your normal movements, sometimes when you bend forward, sometimes when you rotate, or if you're laying on your back and you bend your knees and roll them over to the side in like a supine twist, you may hear a kind of crack in your low back or sort of SI area. And this is kind of normal, it's kind of natural, and it is usually caused by air and change in pressure within a joint capsule. And as you move and the bubble of air gets pushed through the joint fluids, it makes a little popping sound. That's considered crepitus by cavitation. Arthritic crepitus sounds a little more like a snap or a click or a coarse grating or grinding sensation when you move a certain way. So I have had both. I was an addicted to crepitus by cavitation teen. I used to crack my knuckles all the time. And my mom told me to stop or you'll get arthritis. And I haven't. The only joint I have arthritis in is my thumb, and that's one that I didn't crack. And I had arthritic crepitus, or a version of arthritic crepitus in my spine, related to degenerative disc disease. Can't stand that phraseology. I generally call that disc desiccation or disc compression. So I have a bunch of stuff going on in my spine, and for a very long time, my spine would go. I could hear it sort of grating when I would move a certain way, and it was audible to other people, so it was kind of embarrassing in certain situations. And this grating can be caused, we're not always talking about bone on bone, and we're not always talking about the same structures in your body that are causing this snap, crackle, pop sensation. So let's talk about where it's coming from. It could be coming from your connective tissue. You may have a tendon or maybe even an adhesion on a connective tissue, and that will generally sound more like a snap. But it can also sound like grating when you move. It's often in your shoulders, or sometimes the hip or the knee, you'll get a connective tissue snap. I used to have one. I used to get like a psoas tendon snap when I would lay on my back and do kind of a figure 4 stretch. It could, unlikely and not too common, it could in fact be that you're hearing that popping or cracking because there's a foreign body that's come loose in the joint. That could be, in your knees, that would be like meniscus. There could be a small fracture of bone, or even a tidbit of a disc that's gotten sheared off, right? There can be some kinds of soft or bony tissues that, if you've had an injury, they can break loose and float around in the joint and create that popping sound. The facet joint capsule is the joint between your vertebrae, and that can crack or pop, often due to the air pressure changing as the joint fluid forms or collapses, usually collapses. very similar to the sound that your knuckle cracking would be. And that's not a sign of that there's anything wrong in your facet joints, in your spinal joints. Within the actual facet joint capsule, there is the facet joint, which is where the sort of pokey, pointy part of your spinal vertebral bones stack atop one another. They're sort of staircased on top of each other. If you ever look at a spinal model, there's lots of little bony protrusions and prominences that just lay on top of each other. And it is possible that there may be some damaged cartilage between those little bony, pokey joint surfaces of your facet joints. And so sometimes there can be rough facet joint surfaces or a degradation in the cartilage that leads to less smooth gliding on that joint, particularly when you twist. Bend and twist, for example, that's when mine used to happen. It sounds like bone-on-bone grinding, and it may be bone-on-bone grinding. I'll tell you that my spine doesn't do that anymore. I can attest that my spine made that sound when I was at my weakest and my most hopeless, and I had basically stopped moving because I didn't know what else to do with my body because I was in so much pain. I had just gotten a lot weaker, and the weaker you get, your spine is just going to continue to compress upon itself. So refraining from activity is usually not the answer for many of the things we're dealing with. But paralysis is quite common when you don't know what to do for yourself. So I suffered from that what do I do paralysis, and I did get much weaker, and I was having facet joint grinding and grating, and it was definitely embarrassing. What I did to get rid of it was I did a lot of postural change work and work on my respiratory diaphragm. That was super helpful. And then I also changed my relationship to gravity. So I did a whole bunch of creative planks at different levels, and some on my side, some on my back, some on my front, right? So just changing your relationship to gravity so you can build up those stability muscles really helped me a lot with my facet joint grating. It doesn't happen to me anymore. And if you tune back in a couple weeks, I'm going to come back on and I'm going to talk about ACL injuries in the knee. I know this is a back podcast, but my family's deep up in the ACL world right now, and I've got a lot of interesting things to say on the topic. And knees are notorious for popping and cracking. So maybe I'll just follow this podcast up with the knee one, but if it's not in the one right after this, it's coming soon. So tune back in for your ACL knee podcast. So you might want to know, when do I have to worry about these sounds that are coming from my back? Because it is kind of alarming sometimes when it happens, and it's definitely alarming for other people when they can hear it. So you might want to know, what do I need to be worried about? And generally, it's not. Your doctors will probably tell you that if it doesn't hurt and there's no swelling and you haven't had a recent injury to the joint or the area, you probably don't need to worry about it. Sometimes, though, these sounds can indicate that you've got some degeneration going on in the joint area, or that you've got some instability, or that you've got some soft tissue damage or fracture. Particularly if you're coming out of a previous surgery on that area or a nearby area, you definitely want to talk to your doctor about that. And it's good to know if you've got degeneration or instability, and there's definitely things that you can do to prevent those conditions from worsening. So you can be proactive in those scenarios. But generally, you'll see, if you need to be worried about the cracking in your back or the cracking in your joints, you'll see swelling. You'll see sort of a collection of fluid that doesn't drain normally. So when you press on it, it swells back up. And you probably have some pain and maybe a history of injury or tweaking the area. And so in those scenarios, you definitely can go get it checked out. But if it's really not bothering anybody, you probably don't have to worry about it. Which brings us to the last part of this conversation. Why does my back crack? which is, why are you going to someone to crack your back? No, don't crack your back. Just don't. Don't do it. There is no reason to crack your back. It's not helping. It's not. I just don't believe that cracking your back is helping. You can crack it yourself, and you may get a momentary relaxation response, sort of a neural fake out that says, oh, this feels so good. It's not really doing anything. And if you stop doing it, you'll stop being addicted to doing it. But you have to just say no. You know that old slogan. You can use it for drugs, or you can use it for back cracking. And then that sort of leads us into this other area, which is, what about chiropractors? Nope. I'm a hard no. Unless your chiropractor is doing new non-cracking, non-subluxation treatment with you and his other patients or her other patients, I'm just not a fan of going to somebody and having them crack your back. That is not a sustainable solution. It is not an active solution. So you're not participating, you're not learning, you're not able to maintain or continue the treatment on your own. And I have some big question marks on why exactly you're doing that. So, just for a little context on my hard no on chiropractic, I'm a spondylolisthesis specialist. And the number of people that are walking around with this condition, spondylolisthesis, that don't know it, yet are going to a chiropractor for spine care, you really don't want to get your spine cracked if it's already unstable, if you already have a pars fracture, and if you have spondylolisthesis. And it is quite possible, and I have clients who have gone to chiropractic care, didn't know they had spondy, the chiropractor didn't know they had spondy, and it was made significantly, dangerously worse. So that's my context is my people who are spondy people. And I definitely don't think you should go see a chiropractor if you have spondy. Spondy is a condition, spondylolisthesis is a condition of instability within your spinal segments. And going to someone and creating more instability or more mobility in those segments is counterproductive. So if you've got spondy, the solution is not more mobility, the solution is more stability. And so on that line, that really supports my hard no on cracking your back, because I'm a spondy and I educate and coach spondylolisthesis clients. So that sort of wraps it for why your back is cracking. I hope this was instructive. And if you are a back cracker, tomorrow's a new day. Just stop cracking your back. And if you don't know what else to do because your chiropractor takes care of your back, well, that's part of the problem, because you need to be able to take care of your back. So send me an email, get in touch. This is what we do. I hope this was helpful for you. And if you have any questions or comments on the topic, I look forward to hearing back from you. Ciao, ciao.